everybody. As most of you, I'm sure, know, this is Dr. McGill, the head of the choral department here, and I'm incredibly pleased to have 5 guests with us today to discuss singing professions outside of the field of opera, early music, oratorio, and professional ensemble singing mostly. In addition to being 5 extraordinary singers, 5 extraordinary artists, 5 extraordinary musicians, most importantly to me, these are 5 of my favorite people in the world. So Virginia, why don't you tell us who you are and where you are and just a little bit about your path, and we'll get to know you.
My name is Virginia Warnken Kelsey, and I'm a mezzo-soprano. I live in Branford, Connecticut, sunny, beautiful little coastal town, and I do a lot of early music, as we all do. I particularly love 17th century music, but really anything. I love Bach. I've sung lots of Bach, and I also sing with Roomful of Teeth, a contemporary kind of experimental vocal group that takes up a lot of my time. But right now, I am assistant professor of voice at the University of the Pacific.
Thanks for being with us, Virginia. It's really good to have you here. Jonathan, you want to tell us a little about your biography?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Woody. I'm a bass-baritone, originally from the Washington, D.C. area, Prince George's County, Maryland. I studied undergrad voice performance at University of Maryland, and then got a master's degree in early music at McGill University. And for the last 10 or so years, I've been based in New York City, in Brooklyn, singing with a variety of ensembles, including the choir of Trinity Wall Street, which is probably my longest running ensemble now. But I also do a career that includes a lot of early music, also a lot of new music. I also am a composer, and so I've been writing a lot of choral music lately. And yeah, happy to be here and share some of my insights.
Thank you, Jonathan. Also in New York is Andrew Fuchs.
Hello, Andrew Fuchs here. I'm a tenor based in New York. I grew up in the Kansas City, Missouri area and did my undergrad at University of Kansas, and then my master's and doctorate at Stony Brook University on Long Island here in New York, which is kind of what brought me to the East Coast. Like everyone else here, I do a lot of early stuff from like Monteverdi and before through Bach and Handel, and then also a bunch of new music and also a lot of recitaling, like art song. I particularly love singing, so pretty varied. And yeah, I'm really curious to talk about kind of what we all are experiencing on this non-opera path, because I know that whenever I discovered that there was another way, it was very liberating and also quite exciting and a viable career path. So looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Andrew. Farthest from us right now is Molly Quinn, who's in the UK. So welcome, Molly.
Hello, everybody. I'm Molly Quinn, and I'm a soprano. I'm currently in Oxford, UK, and I am originally from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So Oxford and Chapel Hill are both fantastic college towns, but I ended up studying at the Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music in their voice department and opera program for my undergraduate and master's degree. I am currently a voice professor at Sarah Lawrence College outside of New York City. And I have had the joy of singing with everybody on this call in a number of America's finest choral ensembles of different sizes, ranging from 3 voices to 40 people on stage, and have also done a lot of work as a soloist in oratorio in North America and also around the world. And like everybody on this call, I have a great love of opera and a great respect for the art form, but I'm so pleased that to tell you that there is a huge wealth of opportunities outside of that path, and you can still really appreciate what your operatic colleagues are doing, and also still have the opportunity to do the occasional opera while having a rich and fabulous musical life in early music and contemporary ensemble music.
Thanks, Molly. And many of you here at the University of Illinois will recognize David Newman, who's been a guest with us a few times, maybe not most recently, but fairly recently. He's here with us every summer for the Bach Academy that we do here, but the last sort of major concert he was with us for, I think, was the Britain War Requiem. So welcome back virtually, David. Great to have you with us.
I'm David Newman. You know, I grew up in New Jersey, and I went to Westminster Choir College for both my undergraduate and master's degree. And I went as a music education major, and I kind of got shoved into voice performance. And so it was, opera was the first thing that caught me as a voice performance, to convince me that voice performance might be a worthwhile thing. And I remember standing on stage at the Spoleto Festival in an opera and thinking, okay, this is fun. And I really, in some ways, didn't, at least in the front of my mind, I was training for an opera career, and I definitely began my career seeking opportunities as an opera singer and doing some of the traditional path. But meanwhile, I was also singing anywhere I could in the things that I enjoyed, and I really loved Bach. And then as soon as I discovered that I could audition for one Bach thing and get a gig, and audition for 20 operas and get a gig, and the numbers were much better for concert singing. And so I've done a lot of concert singing since. I'm kind of embarrassed, but it was the world that I entered into my career with was one where if you wanted to sing as a soloist, you kind of had to run away from all of your choral singing and pretend that you didn't do it, or people would think less of you. I think that is obviously less true now, because all of us do it, and I've gone back to more choral singing more ensemble singing as I've gotten older, so, which is also my joy.
Which I've been grateful, because I get to work with all of these people at the Carmel Bach Festival, and it's one of the great joys of my life. One of the questions that one of our students asked was, they wondered what the demand was like and whether the demand was growing or getting scarcer. Obviously, COVID threw a wrench in this, but in general, what do you see about sort of the trends of needs for classical singers in ensemble work and new music and early music? And what has your experience been like of the demand?
Well, I might jump in on this, and I think I might just direct the conversation directly to all of the wonderful voice majors who are sopranos and perhaps baritones in the bunch. And you kind of have it ingrained into you at a young age that, you know, sopranos are a dime a dozen and baritones are a dime a dozen. They have to have, you know, that there is kind of a kind of machine producing singers, and there's something that people are really expecting for singers to be. And I think that the demand for dime a dozen sopranos and dime a dozen baritones, that's a myth to begin with. But I think that that people who are able to read, and people who have a unique voice, and people who are willing to commit to being ensemble singers as well as be soloists, I think that the demand for that has grown exponentially in my career and in my time since leaving school, and that in fact sopranos are not a dime a dozen. Sopranos who can be facile and adaptable and present beautifully. That is something that is not a dime a dozen. And so there's a huge demand for people who are willing to do those things. In terms of how that compares against kind of traditional opera process of going and auditioning for young artist programs, those are very, very competitive, and a lot of the dividing lines that happen there that I'm sure that everybody on this call is aware of is the idea of if you are paying for an opportunity, or whether you are being paid for the opportunity, or how those things scale as a young singer. The demand for singers to pay for things will never go away, and especially at that youngest age. And but the demand for singers who are willing to show up and can possess the musical skills to sing in a group, that will also never go away. And that's what's increasing more and more.
Yeah, I went to Manhattan School of Music, which is an opera factory. I went there for my undergrad. And this was, 15, 20 years ago, that I, was there. And even then, I mean, the head of the opera program told me in basically these words that I would never see any success in my career if I did not choose to go into an opera or musical theater sort of path. She actually told me that. Meanwhile, by the time I was 23, like by the time I finished school, I was singing full time. I found wonderful success, as we all have in these paths. And so many people and in school that I was in school with, I remember one of like sort of our opera program exit interview that we were doing in our last meeting of the opera class. And this head of the opera program went around and asked all of the graduating seniors what was their biggest complaint, what did they not like, and every single one of them said the choral program. And I stood up and I was like, no, actually, most of you are going to be doing a lot of ensemble singing in your life. Most of you are not going to be having like seeing opera careers at least for the next 10 years. And I cannot tell you how many of them wrote to me in the 5 years following that, asking if I could recommend them for gigs. And I mean, unbelievable, right? And Molly, just, sort of piggybacking on what you said, the demand for people who can read and sort of have like a sort of sensibility for the flexibility needed to sing in ensembles and various different types of music. I didn't feel comfortable sort of bringing in a lot of these people in, because the skills just weren't what they needed to be, and yet people are still needed for these gigs. I can't tell you how many times, and now, we're doing a gig and we need to bring in somebody last minute, or, there needs to be a sub for something, and it's like, well, who can we find? So yes, please come sing with us. There's a place for you.
This dovetails with a really interesting second question that some people have asked, and that's, what are the skills that you found particularly useful for this particular career track you've been on? And what do you wish you could tell your younger self at the age of these college students listening to you now that they should spend some of their time on, learning some skills that will make their lives easier in the future? Jonathan, it looks like you might want to weigh in here.
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. And I'll reiterate what Molly and Virginia said, which is that sight reading is a really important skill. But I think that gets mentioned a lot. I think a lot of people know at this point that sight reading is important. I would say that some that don't get mentioned as often. One really important one is listening. I think really developing your musical ear as a singer, because I think one of the things that we deal with as we work with other musical professionals who maybe aren't as familiar with singing, and especially aren't as familiar with ensemble singers, is that people tend to assume singers don't have a good ear. And that can often lead to some professional conflict, especially in a chamber music environment, if you're working with a conductor, if you're working with other instrumentalists. So I just think it's really important that you develop those skills for yourself, so that when you walk into those spaces, that you can trust what you hear, that you can trust what you sort of bring to the table as a singing artist. And don't let anyone tell you that singers have lesser musical skills than their instrumentalist colleagues. That being said, I do think that there's a sense of that out there. And so, yeah, I would say listening is really important. As Virginia mentioned, flexibility, I think, is really important, and just a general willingness to take risks. I think we spend a lot of time as undergrads being taught that the goal is to find a vocal technique that leads to sort of consistent, beautiful singing. And I believe very much that consistent, beautiful singing is important and is very valuable in making compelling music making, but it isn't the only part. And so I think if you find yourself in a situation where someone is asking you to do something, not something that would hurt or that would damage your voice in any way, but something that might just be a little different from how your undergrad voice teacher may have taught you of what beautiful singing is, I would say be willing to go for it and try it and have a sort of collegial spirit about it, Now, it may not work. It may not be the best choice at the end of the day. But I think showing that kind of willingness to take risks and try new things and show flexibility, I think is very valuable when you're working with, when you're collaborating with artists. And I guess that I'll sum up my statement by saying that what we do as ensemble singers is our artistry is so focused on collaborating with others. It isn't just the singer and the pianist, or it isn't just the singer and the orchestra in the pit on stage. It's music making that's collective, and that is participating in a set of shared goals. And I think it's just really important, starting from a young place as a singer, to start thinking about that. That's thinking about making music with other people and the value that can bring into your own musical experience.
Absolutely.
Can I join that a bit? Yes to everything you just said. And it made me think about how, even though we are oftentimes singing in an ensemble of who knows how many, 2 to 60, it is actually a very individualist experience, because you're in charge of your singing, of your instrument, of what you bring to the group. There's like, if you're working in an opera, there's like all these extra music directors, there's coaches, there's assistant conductors, people who are monitoring your diction. In an ensemble setting, oftentimes you are responsible for yourself, even though you are amongst a community. It's like this kind of weird dichotomy. So I was just thinking about languages, and of course that's important for any performer that uses words. But I can't tell you how many conductors can barely pronounce foreign diction. And Dr. McGill is a great exception to that rule. He's one conductor who actually takes the time to go through and talk about the difference between the vowels that people maybe just assume that singers know. And oftentimes we do know that. But they're not going to stop and be like, oh, I think that's actually a closed E. They're thinking about bigger picture. There's not enough people kind of monitoring those little details. So for me, I'm always thinking about, what can I bring to this experience that I am responsible for, that I can be accountable for? And I think that's important, because there is not a lot of hand-holding as an ensemble singer. It's usually a smaller organization that doesn't have a huge staff to kind of micromanage what you're bringing. So, the more solid you can be with those skills, I think the more marketable and happier you'll be singing in a group like that.
It's just so exciting to hear you all talk about this. If I can just say one thing that's really struck me from what both Andrew and Jonathan just said, that the world often divides us into different kind of tracks. But it does strike me that the things that both Jonathan and Andrew were just talking about are all skills that, even if your primary life is going to be as an opera singer, those are the things I want to have in the opera singers I collaborate with, is a sense of ownership over their own instrument, a sense of their own artistry that's both incredibly strong as an individual, but incredibly collaborative and flexible, a willingness to take risks and think about sound as expressive, not just beautiful. And the idea of listening, I sort of thought, wow, why aren't we all just talking about that in any track? And for non-singers too. It's really what we do. I don't want to talk, I should listen. So David, do you want to jump in?
I just kept thinking everyone's saying all the right things. And the one thing, or I guess two things I would love to spring off of for just a moment is something Molly said, which is that you have to cultivate your own voice and your own unique voice. It's very easy in this career to get lured into sounding like everybody else. And the last thing anyone needs is someone who sounds like everybody else. So, you need to be you. and it's you that you are selling, and don't try and be someone else, because they're going to be a better them than you can be. So be the best you, with your own unique voice and your own musical, what Jonathan said, your own musical soul that you bring to it, your musical ear, and the kinds of choices that you make and the kinds of sounds you make. Those are the things that make you valuable when they're unique and good.
That's nice. Another question that sort of is related to these is, was there an event in your life that was sort of a turning point and made you fall in love with singing early music, or singing ensemble music, or singing oratorio? Jonathan, I know you very much, when I talk with you, I know you very much identify as a singer of early music. You sing everything, but I think there's sort of part of you that does feel that's who you are. And what was one or some of the experiences that made something click inside you and said, this is who I am?
Yeah, it's funny that that you asked this question, because yes, I do very much think of early music as being who I am. But there wasn't one particular moment. I was probably first exposed to what I now think of as early music as a high school choral singer. I went to all boys high school, and we did a lot of TTBB repertoire, and we did some Renaissance polyphony. We did Victoria and Palestrina. Some of the really straightforward ones that most people have probably, done from an early age, things like Sicut Cervus and O Magnum Mysterium. But for whatever reason, it just really drew me in. That, more than anything else, just really connected with me as a 13, 14-year-old. And then by the end of high school, I was obsessed with Handel's Messiah. I was, most high schoolers are like obsessed with, like pop or whatever. I was listening to Handel's Messiah like every day, all day, in the car after school. So I guess that's what did it. And again, I wasn't even really sure that meant that I needed to go into early music. It was sort of after finishing undergrad that some mentors steered me in that direction. I just knew that was the rep I liked. That, if it came before 1800, I kind of was digging it.
Yeah, I am actually, so, I think most of us, David, I'm not sure if you have, but the rest of us have deep ties with Trinity Wall Street. And my teacher, I went to a performing arts high school, and my first voice teacher, a man by the name of Jimmy Brown, who now directs and teaches in Seattle, he had just come from New York, where he was a member of the Trinity Choir under Owen Burdick. And he just, like you do, I was 15 years old, and like you do with young singers, you give them lots of like personal songs and, things like that. And I just like fell in love with that sound. I just loved it. I don't know what it was. And then I started listening, I also got obsessed with Handel's Messiah. Jonathan, just completely obsessed. And I just have to point out, just to like give a little shout out, Jonathan's Why Do the Nations So Furiously Rage is the best I've ever heard, period, from anybody, forever and ever. So
thanks, Virginia. Thank you.
I second that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so, just having somebody who was and he did a couple of recitals that year that he was there teaching me, and it was all of it was like early music and Britain, which of course we love. And he really kind of set me on the path. He was like, I think that this is for you. And, I think that this is going to be your superpower. And he also, oddly enough, sent me to Manhattan School of Music. He was like, but you should go to MSM and study with this one teacher, which like wasn't exactly the right fit for me, but I ended up in the right place. So like, that's all good. But I'll never forget him and how he just, he early on, he was like, I think this is going to be the thing for you. So I'm very grateful to, to my educators of yore.
Molly, how about you? What made you fall in love with what you now do?
Well, I came to it in the cradle. My father was an organist and choir master, and there are literally photos of me as a 6-month-old lying on his stomach eating misa pange lingua that he was supposed to be studying. I mean, I'm literally
a pasta dish? I'm kidding.
Misa pange lingua is scampi.
Yeah. Miso pange lingua.
Oh.
Miso pange. We need to open up a restaurant.
Well, there is. I don't know that this is important, but can I say that ensemble and early music singers are also the most food educated group I hang out with. And there's something that seems to run in tandem with, we like to sing Bach, we like to eat. So back to you, Molly, and more serious things.
Oh yeah, that's true. We definitely know we have fine taste for music and food. But yeah, I just grew up around a lot of different sounds. And by a lot of different sounds, I mean, 70s rock music and 20th century French organ music, Bach and before. I mean, like I really like the sounds that I heard as a child were quite specific. And it was who I was. I think I was just kind of born to sing this music, and it's almost like my dad dialed up like I would like a little soprano baby who can sing all the things I want. I'm kidding a little bit, but I just always knew that that was going to be, you know, what I would sing. And sure, could I have had a career as a country singer? Absolutely. You know, do I like to belt? Absolutely. Do I adore certain, you know, it's just who I am and it's just my voice. And like my voice, it just really works with it. And I love every different shade of the human voice. Literally, I love unique voices. It doesn't matter what repertoire they're singing as long as it's a genuine, authentic, unique shade of voice. And so that's just what my shade of voice is. And I try to always sound like myself when I sing.
I add one thing. You know, looking back, I guess I did have some early music experience growing up, like in high school with my like madrigal choir or chamber choir, but it never was really, no one said like, this is early music. It was like, here's a madrigal that the King Singers sang that my director enjoyed, so we programmed it. Or I had a Bach aria in undergrad when I was a baritone, and it was just like, oh, you need like an oratorio thing, so here. But it wasn't like, this is Bach. So I never really knew. It was just like, it could be Schubert, it could be Handel, I'll sing it. I'll sing anything. And I feel like I have learned so much early music on the job. I didn't grow up listening to Bach motets. I did not sing a full Handel Messiah until I was 30. Like Carnegie Hall, professional choir, my first time singing it next to people who had been singing it for 30 years. You know, my first B minor was with Trinity Wall Street on a tour. Like I never learned this stuff pre kind of professional career. So even if you don't know you like it yet, or you're not sure about it, like you know, it might come your way. Just say yes and try it. Cause I really didn't have any specific intention of starting this path. It just kind of came and I said, sure, I'll try it. And now I obviously love it. But yeah, I never had this kind of like premonition of or early love of Schutz that I love now, but it wasn't my family. They're all band directors. Like I grew up with like trumpets and like marching band and Joni Mitchell, and this was never part of the discussion, even though now it takes up such a huge part of my career.
Thank you. David?
The only thought I had, that while I said earlier that I was training to be an opera singer, but of course I also sang in Westminster Choir, and then, you know, with some friends, we had a group that we did independently from school, where I say that jokingly because Andy was the sort of leader of this group, and we outside of school did our own programming of early music, and we did it constantly, and my voice teacher threatened to kick me out of the studio, and I said, well, then you'll have to kick me out of the studio because I'm not quitting this group. And so we self-educated a lot, and I learned a ton from sitting in Andy's living room listening to CDs.
I do remember those days really fondly, David. You and I sitting going, listen to Anne-Sophie von Otter sing Purcell. This is awesome. You know,
my teacher in college used to always, she'd be like, she would call it booga booga. Like whenever somebody was really good at something, she would be like, this is your booga booga thing. And Purcell was my booga booga thing for her. And so we would listen, she would play me, we would sit on her couch after my lesson, and she would play me recordings of Anne-Sophie von Otter singing Purcell, and was like...
Yeah. And discovering all the Handel oratorios through those John Eddy Gardner recordings that came one after the other every year, and then saying, "Hey, let's try to perform some of that," and not knowing what we were doing, but learning by doing it was so valuable.
Sight reading parties.
Not to hijack the conversation, but there was recently a conversation in a voice teachers group about ornamentation, and they were asking for recommendations of books to read about ornamentation, and there were several, you know, good recommendations, including this one that's sitting right next to me. But the you know, one of the good things is the people who really got it were like, no, you just have to listen to a lot of. Don't read treatises. I mean, you can read treatises, fine, but listen to people who have read those treatises and who have spent their whole lives doing ornamentation, and then you will know how to do ornamentation. But you need to just steep yourself in it until you get it, and then and then you'll have it intuitively.
Thank you.
Sorry.
One of the questions that really gave me a little pause that came through, and I'd love to get some of your takes on this, was someone said, have you ever gone through a period where you lost your passion for singing? And what did you do to get it back? And I thought that may be a really important question for some folks. So, and you're people that I think of as some of the most authentic, passionate singers I know. But there have to be sort of passages that are drier than others, at least, even if you haven't totally lost your passion for singing. And I thought, this would be something I would love to have heard somebody talk about when I was younger. So Andrew, looks like you might resonate with this one.
I mean, yesterday this happened. I mean, like it just happens, it's tough. Singing, being any musician, it's a hard thing to do. And there are times when it just is not jiving with what I'm feeling. And also there came a point where I kind of woke up and realized that, oh, this is my job. It kind of went from that kind of young, passionate, oh, I just love all this stuff, to like, oh, okay, this is actually like I'm going to the office today to do my job. And that kind of the grief of I'm not losing it, but of that shift I felt that very deeply. But at the end of the day, we're all still doing this because of something that drew us in originally. And I think it's so important to use kind of touchstones. If I feel, and it's like, I am someone who, to perform well, I really need to be inspired. Like if I'm not feeling it, you're going to know vocally, physically, like it's just, I don't hide myself very well in that way. So I try to just keep myself really inspired, listening to recordings that drew me in originally to being a singer, Wagner, Renee Fleming, whatever, just to like get my kind of to stir that passion. But also to know that like bad days happen, bad months happen, I mean, like these stretches can be an indefinite amount of time. And if you're able to not force yourself to kind of keep at it when you're not feeling great, I think that's really wise, because practicing out of frustration or out of desperation because you think that you've lost it or something bad is happening is, for me, just builds in a lot of muscle bad tension and self-doubt and inner chatty conversations. And I think it's just good to give yourself the space, recognize that like, okay, I'm going through this 2 months of really not enjoying what I'm doing, but I'm still here. I'll try to get myself re-jazzed about what this career is, and then go from there, because it comes in waves. It's not, I haven't experienced that permanently, obviously. I'm still doing this, but it certainly is a feeling that comes and goes.
4 years ago, I almost completely quit singing. I was like actively searching out other career paths. I was done touring 300 days a year, physically exhausting, emotionally exhausting, and just, yeah, it happens, like you said. So singing is so physical. It's such, when it's like just such this, it's a symbiosis of like physical body and mind body and emotional body, and they sort of all have to work together seamlessly to actually feel good and feel right. And that's just not always going to be the case when you're, the older you get, the more tired you get, and the more you work, and you travel, and some days you can't muster it up. And I nearly broke at one point. And one thing that sort of helped me shift my thinking is that, so I did this program, sort of a 12-week program called The Artist's Way. And it's sort of like a creative discovery program, and it's multidisciplinary. It's sort of geared towards writers, but any kind of creative artist who is feeling blocked or needs to find more inspiration is great for them. And so basically what it does is it fosters creativity with the lack of judgment. I think as singers, as artists, we are so hard on ourselves because it's our job. We are constantly being critiqued. We are, it becomes a point where it's not for ourselves anymore. And stepping back and sort of realizing that, no, like you're an artist because you can't be anything else. and so taking it back for yourself is the way that I sort of found my way out of it, and I did so by engaging in creative endeavors outside of music. I love making stuff. I love just being creative, whether it's like arts and crafts or, you know, I'm just always like wanting to have my hands busy doing something, and doing it, removing the judgment from it completely. Just being like, I am creating something for the sake of creating. Actually, it helped me to kind of put some of the fun back in the music making. And even though I knew that I wasn't always going to be inspired by everything I'm doing, especially doing a lot of new music, like a lot of new projects and premieres, like not everything is a masterpiece, you know, it's just sort of, that's just kind of how it rolls. And being able to be like, well, yeah, okay, I'm getting paid to do this, that's great, but there's always going to be something else that I'm going to be inspired by, and sort of reminding myself of that. So if you're feeling super burnout in your sort of creative artistic life, I recommend that program. I think that it really kind of changed my my approach.
I'm sure glad you're still singing.
Oh, thanks. Me too.
And Andy, can I jump in on this conversation?
Please. Yeah, please.
I can speak a little bit about the period of time when I was feeling kind of lost artistically, but I'm hearkening back to the moment that undergrads are about to face once they leave school or once they finish their graduate program. And I remember that being a period of real uncertainty for me, and feeling like I didn't know I was kind of financing, applying to young artist programs and trying to finance a move to a city for opportunities, and waiting tables, you know, moving home for a little bit and reconnecting with friends who were doing completely different things, and feeling like a lot of realizing how much of myself I had, how much of myself aside from the musician and singer had kind of not been activated for a long time while in school. And I found that as I interact with younger colleagues online, I feel that trepidation from them as they move forward, feeling like if they don't have a church job, if they don't have the best church job, or if they don't have whatever singing opportunity they have, it creates like a shadow of doubt in them. And I think that window of time from age, you know, maybe 21 to 26 even, right? That window right there, there's no right way to be moving forward. And you are not going to be the things that, the kind of experiences you want to have, they aren't going to be happening all the time. So how do you acknowledge the fact that you are way more than yourself as a performer? You are so important to everybody in your life, aside from the people who are hiring you, or more importantly, the people who aren't hiring you. You know, that little self-critical thing of trying to be who those people want you to be. Your family loves you. If you have a difficult with your relationship with your family, your friends and colleagues, and if you don't have those people in your life, maybe it's time to just take one step back and look from side to side, the people living next to you. Are there people who might be able to get back inside of you and help you find like that little kernel of what makes you unique, that you're then going to be able to bring back as you get your feet going, as you figure out what way is north or south when you get out of the subway station. Once you start getting your own bearings in your life, then that's going to be, you're going to arrive and feel like you know who you are a little bit more. I just remember that being a really confusing time of my life. And I will also say that once you get that kind of ball rolling and, you know, you have a great year, you're like, oh, I'm doing this opera and I am a soloist at such and such place, and things are going, and you have another year and it's like that, and you have another year and you start to realize that, oh, this is what my career is like. It's up and down. Some months are fantastic. Some months are really hard. There will be a moment of doubt in that window when you realize that actually this is what this career is. It's not, you know, velvet couches and interviews. It's a job, and it's a career. So those are the two big transitions I know I've gone through. And there have been many other periods of doubt that have to do with me personally, but those things I think are just part of moving forward as an artist.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Molly. One of the other things that, a question that sort of was asked that relates to that, I think a little bit, is sort of what the rhythm of this career is like and what you can count on. Because I do think it's one of the things that's scary and enticing about it both, is that it maybe isn't as predictable as a 9-to-5 office job for many people. David or Jonathan, do we want to feel comfortable weighing in on that a little bit? What the rhythm of this is like, and what schedule is like for you as a person in this kind of career?
Sure, David, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, we have two very different ways of approaching it, I think. But yeah, I mean, I intentionally did nothing but sing for the first till I was 30, which I'm not sure is a choice I would replicate. But I spent my career until I was 30 singing for anyone who would hire me, pretty much anything that they asked me to sing. And I still did some operas, and in fact, for my whole career, I've still done like one opera a year. But I also did lots of concert work, and then around when I was 30, I got offered out of the blue a teaching job at a university, and I thought, nobody offers these out of the blue, so you better take it. And so I took it, and it started as a few hours a week, and now it's my whole week. I'm officially adjunct, but I'm teaching way more than full time. And yet the teaching career is flexible enough that, at least for me, that I can leave and go and do concerts if there are any happening, which there aren't. But Jonathan has a whole other way of, integrating some stability with the.
Yeah, my path sort of was, I finished my undergrad, and the work that was really clear that I could get right away was church work, church jobs. And I know we briefly mentioned them, but just to say, for those who may not be aware, there is a community around the country of professional church musicians. Almost every church, of course, has an organist, but many churches have professional singers, whether that be a full choir or even a quartet of soloists. So that's one way that young singers can start working right away in singing, and that's what I did. And I also did opera chorus with the sort of large opera company that was in my city, which was the Washington National Opera. So I kind of made my living in those first years, sort of between church singing, which was much more early music focused, and opera chorus singing, which of course, like all my undergrad opera training prepared me for. But a lot of times we get this message that if you take the opera chorus job, that you have no chance of ever being an opera soloist. And I just want to say that that is false. It was false then, and it's false now. Even my first year in the chorus of Washington National Opera, I was actually given an opportunity to have a bit role. And I think if I had stayed in that company and stayed in that city for many years, I probably could have worked my way up to having more and more featured roles. And that is absolutely a pathway in every major city, is to sort of start in the chorus and work your way up. Not everybody is going to be opera singers, of course, who get flown around from A house to A house. Lots and lots of folks around the country can make it work. Singing in an opera chorus professionally, I just want to point that out. Though most of us now don't do opera chorus as much professionally, it is an option. I would say in terms of the day-to-day over the years, it really has been, as Molly said, a journey of getting the ball rolling. In the earlier years, if I had one gig that was sort of what I wanted to do, whether that be the music I wanted to sing or the role I wanted to have or the colleagues I wanted to be with, that might be one thing for a month or 2 months or 3 months that sort of gave me everything I was looking for. And then in the meantime, there were the gigs that didn't give me everything I was looking for. Often for me, those were gigs working as a ringer with symphonic choirs. Not to knock that work. that repertoire is really, of course, extraordinary. But it was not my favorite thing to sing Brahms' Requiem in the chorus or to sing Bruckner Te Deum in the chorus. And yet it was work that paid me to sing. And so I said yes to it. Somebody gave me that piece of advice as a young singer, and I still stick to it today. I, maybe should learn a little bit better how to pick and choose now that I have more options. But certainly when I was a younger singer, it was just say yes to everything. I've also had some non-singing day jobs. For me, they were more along the lines of administrative work. And then eventually I did some admin work within the arts community, which I think is also a nice way to supplement your income if necessary. Often because those arts organizations tend to understand the needs of a performer and can be a little more flexible to those needs. But yeah, I would say that the recipe to success as a younger singer, I think, is to be really game and to be willing to take work when it comes. And I think, as Molly and Virginia expressed, and Andrew also, you do have to have enough of a sense of yourself to know where your line is personally and what is too much for you and what is going to not be fulfilling, and take away some of the joy that comes from music making. I think if I was only ever doing symphonic choir ringing, I probably wouldn't be as happy of a musician. But because I'm able to mix and match a lot of what I do, and sort of informally, we like to say that there are like three main pillars of the value of a gig, and that would be good friends, good music, and good money. And I think good music can be divided into maybe whether you really like the piece you're doing and also whether you really like the people you're doing the piece with. So I would say that success is if you get 2 out of 3 of those, more often than that you get only 1 out of 3 of those. I would say that that is how I measure success for myself. And of course, continuing to try to get 3 out of 3, but this world is what it is, and you don't always get everything you want. But I think that's how I've managed to stay motivated to keep pushing forward.
Thank you. That sort of brings up, maybe we have time for one last area to talk about, and that's obviously what I love and admire about this group of 5 most is their artistry and humanity. But there is a part of something I admire from people who have this career is the way they manage the business side of their lives. Because this is something that you're responsible for that nobody can do for you. And that you have to control your own calendar, and you don't have an agent in this kind of work particularly. So what advice would you give yourself, again, maybe your younger self? Somebody, if you were, or a student who's listening to this and contemplating exploring this kind of career, what are the sort of business, logistical, entrepreneurial things that you've learned by doing this? Because my guess is that for some of you, it came relatively naturally, but for others of us, this was not who we are at all. And we did it because of the artistic side of it, but we had to learn sometimes by trial and error, how not to double schedule ourselves. Or, I went through a period where, I had to learn the hard way those things. So I'd love for you to pass on your wisdom to our students, the sort of nuts and bolts business. What do you wish you'd known when you were starting out that side of the business?
I have one very quick thing. So as freelancers, you're most likely going to be paid in 1099 income, which is independent contractor. Withhold a portion of every fee that you get. And I still could be better about this, but I've started, they have all these apps now where they will automatically, if it hooks up to your bank account, and so you don't even have to think about it, it'll automatically take a percentage out of your checking account and it'll put it in this like savings app. Great. I use a couple of different ones of those. There's one called Digit, and there's one called Capital with a Q. And anyway, recommend, but yes, they're 1099 income. When it comes to be tax day, you will be very stressed out if you have not saved like a good 25-30% of your paycheck. Less if you're really good about learning how to do deductions. But anyway, that's my very quick advice.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Who else?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that and say, just in general, like, pay attention to your saving and spending. It can often be times of great bounty and then great scarcity in this work. most of us are usually pretty well employed in the month of December, for instance, but then maybe the months of January and February are a little bit less. So just remember when you have a good month to save. Very useful.
I would say that in terms of organizing your inbox, that's something that I wish I had been better about when I was younger. Not only just from a tax standpoint, currently I have, 2025, 2020 taxes, all these things kind of stacking to I can go ahead and save an email that might have an important piece of information or a deduction, but also just figuring out, how are you going to communicate when you have a conflict? Do you understand how to communicate with somebody who's trying to hire you for something if you need more money, if there's wiggle room about that, if there's a day you might need off? Those are all really challenging. Even as I'm saying that, I can feel my body kind of tense up because it comes back, even thinking about if you're in school. So say you want to switch studios, you're really curious about that. What is the professional way? If you need to make changes or advocate for yourself in your life, you have got to figure out a way to have difficult conversations with people. And so maybe you need to have a buddy, maybe you need to have a mentor to help you, coach you through those things. Because some people, it comes really naturally. I have a friend who's made a transition to being an arts management person. And he's somebody who I just if I have a problem and I need somebody to look at my email and just tell me, what do you think about this? Am I saying this the right way? Just trusting the fact that we don't all have the same gifts. We don't all have the same gifts. And in the arts industry, you might be dealing with some people who are not the clearest communicators, or perhaps are being slightly manipulative because they know that you need an opportunity or feel like they have something over you. And it's okay to get a second opinion about how do I deal with a professional matter with a trusted source, that would be a big one.
It's interesting. That also brings up that so many of the people who are hiring you are also at their hearts artists. And it means that the people who are in charge of these organizations also may not be as skilled at this kind of communication as you would wish, but you're the ones who will pay the price for it. And so there is a way in which the people that do this business well are good at sometimes dealing with administrators who need your help. So Andrew, it looks like you might have something to say.
Molly, I'm so glad you said that, because that was the first thing that came to my mind was, as a rule, I try to, I do not, when I'm emailing about something, I do not put the sender's address in the to line. I take it out, I write my email, I reread it. If it's maybe a possibly contentious situation of withdrawing from something or some kind of conflict, I'll sleep on it. Or my partner, bless his heart, I'm always like, how does this sound? Do I sound crazy? Oh, because you never know. Email context, we email most of the time when we're doing these things, and context is so difficult. And I think it's really important to take a step back and say, how will this be received? Or how do you think it might be received? And try to just scale it back to the basics. I write a big thing and I delete half of it and then I send it. I think that's really important to just take a step back and to not get sucked into writing in the heat of the emotions. If something, wild has happened and you're just that's not going to be good. Even if you're in the right, it's not going to put yourself forward in a positive way. And those impressions, that's no joke. Those things can really stay part of your legacy in a way. And I think to put yourself forward in a good light as often as possible is extremely important.
Yeah, and let me jump in again here to say, as someone who hires singers, that I think sometimes we think it's the pure beauty of the singing and the artistry that makes us hire them. But there's a huge part of it, which is how easy are they to work with. And that even the world is, if it ever was this way, it's not this way anymore, that we just don't hire divas anymore. And, if there's somebody who's too hard to work with, it's really unlikely that they're going to get hired again. And that, so I mean, it's just, don't burn bridges and be
with your colleagues too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Jonathan, I don't want to jump on your train there. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, now that we're talking about this, just to say some really basic things, in case no one has ever said them to those listening to this. Be on time, which means early. Be prepared, know what it is that you are going to be working on that day with the people you're going to be working with. You know, whether that means you have to look at the music in advance or whether you're a strong enough sight reader, still you have to be prepared. Have a great attitude, you know, be happy to be there. Treat your colleagues with respect, whether they are your colleagues that you're working with or working under, or who are working under you eventually one day. Bring a pencil.
Those are more valuable than people know, and it's especially true at the beginning of your career. That you know, always be prepared. And this is again one of the things I admire about all of you. But the same level of preparation at the beginning of your career, people will be looking to see if you're prepared in a way that means you have to sort of be ready to prove yourself. And you know, there are always circumstances where you're affected by other people in the room. And honestly, it's early in your career that you don't have the luxury of working with people that make you better all the time. That early in your career, you work with people who make it harder. And so it means that the least experienced person is the person who has to be the most well prepared, because they don't have they're probably not in the gig yet where they get to sing with 4 other bassists who have sung this piece 13 times. And they know it's just going to be they could be on autopilot, it's going to be beautiful. But you know, you may know it really well and you're in a section that didn't do any preparation. It's going to be really hard not for you to be lumped in with that group. So just, David,
that's something that can, I'm so sorry, just one more little point. That's something that can actually set you apart when you are entering the industry as a young singer. If you show up and you have a level of preparation and a level of collegiality, that everyone notices that pretty quickly. And so if you're young and you show up that way, people will absolutely recommend you and pass you forward in that way. So.
And even when I hear just a spectacular audition, the number of times I hired someone from an audition with no other information has maybe happened 3 times in my entire career. That even if it's one of the most beautiful auditions I've ever heard, it makes me want to talk to the people on their resume that I know and say, how's this person to work with? Are they as good as they seem? And until I get 4 or 5 good reports, they're just sort of in the waiting room of my mind. And it's and I think this is also a good thing to know in terms of auditions, is that I don't think auditions are almost never I do the audition and I get the job. It's I have done the audition and I've sung with 6 people that I don't even know about who this conductor has heard mention you. And on my resume, I have a teacher that he knows is a friend of his, and those kinds of things all add up. And then I'm comfortable hiring someone after I have 6 or 7 of those things. But until I do even the best auditions, I'm skeptical that they've prepared that one piece really well and can knock it out of the park. Can they do it with other music? Can they work with other people? And so I would say don't give yourself unrealistic expectations for an audition. An audition, I don't think, is a gateway to a job. It's one of 5 or 6 introductions you have to a person.
Can I just jump in there about funny transitions that happen in life? I don't know, probably about 5 years ago, I started being somebody that people call to ask whether or not what I make of such and such singer. And it's a funny thing because I don't know, I don't always think I'm somebody who's like on the forefront of every work situation, and I'm certainly not calling the shots anywhere, but I am surprised the random people I have worked with who call me up to ask about somebody. Or just ask an impression or just kind of mining me for information about a situation. And on this call, I mean, everybody knows I'm certainly just there to kind of lift other people up. But you know, it's interesting that happens. And thinking about as a soprano, whenever I'm asked to do a gig and I'm unable to do it, the people who I want to put forward to go in my place, and knowing that I want those people to succeed, and I want to make sure that everybody who comes, you know, who I've worked with, I just wanting to make sure that people feel like they're being set up for success. I feel like that's something that I just didn't really, I don't know when that transition happened, and it started to make me nervous at first. And then I realized, actually, no, I think people were probably doing the same thing. They were just asking about me before, and now they're asking me about other people. And so that's an exciting thing to know that the people you're working with, the people you're showing respect to, the people that you have showed up for on time, even the people, I mean, I'm certainly, everybody on this call knows, like, I'm not perfect. You know, I don't show up. I'm many great things, but I'm also some not so great things. So just knowing the fact that like somehow in the mix of it, we all know what we can trust from somebody, and just putting your best foot forward when you can, and not taking it too hard when you can't.
David, any final thoughts from you?
Molly was saying what you can trust for someone, and I was thinking about how she stepped out as Papagena on like 2 hours notice.
Mm-hmm.
Which was so fantastic and stole the show in the process.
Zingspiel, it's my forte, it's my strong suit.
I guess one summary that I thought of the things that Virginia and Andrew and Molly had said, especially, was that you need to have systems. Make sure that you have a system in place. And I have a story about that I had come up with a very good calendaring system for myself that worked very well, but involved carrying a big, heavy book around with me. And I really had made it work. And then I got really excited about a Palm Pilot and decided to transfer my scheduling to that. And it ruined my life for several years. Because I had a system that worked, and I had tried to change it. So now is a really good time to develop your systems that work. Make sure that you have a system that works, especially for keeping track of your life, for keeping track of your taxes, and you really need to. Virginia, thank you for bringing that up, because it's like the biggest thing that nobody tells you.
Still. Every year, it's still scary.
Traumatic.
There's an app for everything. So yes, David, there's systems. Yes.
I will fess up. I wrote down the names of the 2 apps you mentioned because I still need help here.
There's a game changer. Yeah, Digit and Capital, both great. Love that.
So all of us are still doing this. Hey, we've been at this for an hour, so I could talk about anything with the 5 of you all day. It's so insightful and so beautiful. And just to thank you for your generosity, and to finish by saying that as Jonathan sort of said, and this is a cliche in this business, is sort of that 3-legged stool of good money, good people, good music. The good money is in some ways the part that allows us to do the other 2. And the other 2 are the things that bring us joy and make us human beings. And for me, this group of 5 and the colleagues that I make music with them, with their colleagues that join us in projects, are the reasons I am a musician and want to stay a musician, is because the opportunity to make music with human beings and singers and artists of this caliber makes the rest of everything I do worth it. So I cannot thank you enough for your generosity in sharing with me and my students your time today, and your wisdom and your experience. And I wish to all of you students who are listening that you will have colleagues of this generosity and humanity as you go forward into whatever part of music is your life. So thanks very much. And I guess the reading is ended.
Thank you.